Hey guys, so today we are going to read our next story in the Odyssey. Now, it has been a while since we have read a story. You had that weekend, and then you had those 2 days of working on that project. So I'm going to make sure that we are on the same page before we pick up with this next story called Cattle of the Sun God. First things first, please make sure that you complete warm up number 7. We did not have a warm up yesterday, but we are back on those. So make sure that you complete that in Google Classroom. As always, please make sure to answer incomplete sentences. Okay, next thing to remember, I've talked about it a bunch of times at the start of every single video. Remember, Odysseus is telling this story to the court of the Phaeacians. We are getting this story via flashback. So that is where we are right now. Odysseus is sitting down. He's saying, okay, here's how I ended up on Calypso's island. Here's how I ended up washing up on your shore. This is what happened to me. And he is telling the story. First thing is those lotus eaters. We've covered them. His men eat the fruit. They're kind of stuck there because they lose the will to live. He drags them off the island. Then we run into good old Polyphemus, the Cyclops. He gets stuck on Polyphemus's island in the cave. He outsmarts him and gets off. Then we deal with Aeolus. Aeolus gives him that bag of wind. The men foolishly open the bag of wind. They get blown back to Aeolus, who sends them on their way. They deal with the Laestrygonians, who take out most of Odysseus's men. So all we have left is one ship full of men, including Odysseus. Then we visit good old Circe. We're there for a year. Circe tells the men that they should visit the land of the dead to talk to Tiresias. Odysseus needs to speak to him. Tiresias gives him a prophecy as what is going to happen in the rest of the story. One of the things he does prophesize is what will happen on Thrinacia, the island of the sun god Helios. So we're going to see that in today's story. Then we go back to Circe. Remember, Circe also gives him a prophecy about the monsters that they are going to face. Those monsters being the sirens, those half-bird, half-female creatures that sing songs that cause men to lose their minds, jump off their ships, and stay on their island forever and waste away to skin and bones. And then we have Scylla, which is our six-headed monster, 12 legs, who swallows 6 men, remember, for each gullet. One gullet, one man, so she has 6 of them, 6 men taken total. Then we have Charybdis, which is this kind of under-the-sea whirlpool kind of looking creature that sucks up part of the sea and spits it out. So those are the monsters that we have seen Odysseus and his men deal with so far. Now, the last thing that even Circe also prophesied was that he was going to deal with the cattle on Thrinacia, which is what we are going to see in today's story. So, without further ado, have your story in front of you. We are going to go ahead and go through it together. This story is called Cattle of the Sun God. The sun god that we know from the past is Apollo. This one is going to be Helios. Helios is more of just the sun itself. Apollo is that god, and Helios is the sun itself. Remember, we have that anthropomorphism, relating one, this kind of non-human, you're giving a human entity to this non-human thing, which is this sun, and that's going to be Helios. So they're not the same thing. Helios and Apollo are not the same person, but Helios is just the sun itself. Okay, so we're picking up cattle of the sun god, cattle being these cows. Okay, let's read the introduction together. Cattle of the sun god. Odysseus urges his exhausted crew to bypass Thrinacia, the island of the sun god Helios. When the men insist on landing, Odysseus makes them swear not to touch the god's cattle. Odysseus is still speaking to Alcinous's court. Remember, we have that flashback. He is still telling this is what happened to him in the past. And they land on Thrinacia. And it's kind of just to briefly stay there for a rest. And Odysseus tells his men, do not touch the god's cattle. Okay, he doesn't tell them why, but he just tells them, do not touch. When we know, when he doesn't tell the men why, they normally end up doing things that they probably shouldn't be doing. In the small hours of the third watch, when stars that shone out in the first dusk of evening had gone down to their setting, a giant wind blew from heaven. The clouds driven by Zeus's shrouded land and sea in a night of storm. So, just as dawn with fingertips of rose, we see that personification yet again, touched the windy world, we dragged our ship to cover in a grotto, a sea cave where nymphs had chairs of rocks and sanded floors. I mustered all the crew and said, old shipmates, our stores are in the ship's hold, food and drink. So what he means by stores there is not like a store like Walmart that you can go to. A store is just where they're storing their food, okay? The cattle here are not for our provision. Provision means not for our use, or we pay dearly for it. So they land on Thrinacia. Remember that they're stopping on Thrinacia because of this storm that is happening. We have to consider what god is in control of the storms. We have good old Zeus. Remember, Zeus is not very happy with, most of the gods are not very happy with the Greeks and Odysseus in particular. So Zeus maybe caused the storm on purpose to make Odysseus's men have to stop on Thrinacia. So they stop on Thrinacia, they land in this little grotto, they roll their ship up, and then Odysseus turns to his men and say, we have enough food and drink in our stores on this ship currently. So please remember, they stole all the sheep from Polyphemus. So they have enough food is what he's saying. Do not touch what is on this island. Okay, these cattle here, these cows that are on this island are not for us. Do not touch them. So he does warn his men here. Fierce the god is who cherishes these heifers and these sheep, Helios, and no man avoids his eye. So basically, that's the explanation he gives his men. He says the man, the god that cherishes these heifers, the guy that these heifers belong to, loves them, and no person can avoid his gaze, meaning that he sees everything. He is the sun, so he sees everything. So he says, do not touch these cattle. He does not tell his men what is going to happen to them. At this point, Odysseus does know that if the men eat the cattle, all of them will die. Tiresias and Circe have both told him this. So he is holding back this fact from his men. To this, my fighters nodded. So they agreed. They said, sure, we're not going to touch these cattle. Yes, but now we had a month of onshore gales blowing day in, day out south winds or south by east. So they are on this island for a month at least. Okay, so the storm goes on for a month. They cannot leave this island. As long as bread and good red wine remained to keep the men up and appease their craving, they would not touch the cattle. But in the end, when all the barley in the ship was gone, hunger drove them to scour the wild shore with angling hooks for fishes and seafowl, whatever fell into their hands, and lean days wore their bellies thin. So they run out of food, they start to get hungry, they're looking for fish, they're looking for seafowl, whatever fell into their hands. We know that Poseidon's still angry at them, so maybe he doesn't make it very easy to catch fish. So lean days, they start to lose weight, their bellies are wearing thin, so they're not being very healthy, they're not getting the food that they need, they're starving. So you have to keep that in mind, that they're getting pushed to this point of extreme measures. The storms continued. So one day I withdrew to the interior. Remember, these I pronouns are referring to Odysseus himself because he is telling this story as a flashback. So one day I withdrew to the interior to pray the gods in solitude. Solitude means alone, for hope that one might show me some way of salvation. So what Odysseus says is, I'm just going to walk off by myself to the center of the island, and I'm going to pray to the gods. I'm going to have this moment of like meditation, basically. He's like, I'm going to pray to the gods and hope that they can help me out of here. They can give me salvation. They can help me out. Slipping away, I struck across the island to a sheltered spot out of the driving gale. I washed my hands there and made supplication to the gods who own Olympus. Remember, supplication is going to be that sacrifice, given part of your meal. All the gods but they, for answer, only closed my eyes under slow drops of sleep. So what Odysseus is saying happened here is that he goes to the center of the island, he starts praying to the gods, and the gods don't give him any signs, they just make him fall asleep. Okay, so the gods are making him fall asleep according to him. Now, on the shore, so back with his men, Eurylochus, this is a character you might circle, we haven't met him before, he's just one of Odysseus' men. Eurylochus made his insidious plea. Remember, insidious was one of your vocabulary words. Insidious meaning this evil, crafty, treacherous kind of way. Comrades, he said, you've gone through everything. Listen to what I say. All deaths are hateful to us, mortal wretches, but famine is the most pitiful, the worst end that a man can come to. So what he is saying here, he's saying that all deaths are hateful to us. We don't want to die. Death sucks. But he's saying famine is the most pitiful. So dying from hunger is not honorable at all. We don't want to do that. That would suck if the reason after all of this time, facing all of these monsters that we have and all of these challenges, that if we died from hunger, that would be horrible. Will you fight it? Come, we'll cut out the noblest of these cattle for sacrifice to the god who owns the sky, it's me, Helios. And once at home, in the old country of Ithaca, if ever that day comes, we'll build a costly temple and adorn it with every beauty for the Lord of the Noon. Lord of the Noon meaning that the support of the sun is the highest at noon. But if he flares up over his heifers lost, wishing our ship destroyed, and if the gods make cause with him, why then I say, better open your lungs to a big sea once for all, than waste his skin and bones on a lonely island. So what he's saying here, he says, we're going to take one of these cows, we're going to sacrifice it, we're going to pay tribute to the gods, and then once we get back to Ithaca, we'll build a temple for Helios, so he can't be mad at us. But then he's saying on the opposite side, Eurylochus makes this argument that if it does happen, if Helios gets super mad and tries to destroy their ship and does destroy their ship, then at least they will die at sea, which is a more noble death than just wasting away on land. So he's trying to make this argument, this kind of claim to get these men to kill one of these cows. Thus Eurylochus, and they murmured, Aye, trooping away at once to round up the heifers. It did not take much convincing from these men for them to be like, sure, Eurylochus, we're finna do what you are asking us to do. So they walk off, they grab one of the cows to round up a bunch, actually. Now, that day, tranquil cattle with broad brows were grazing near, and soon the men drew up around their chosen beasts in ceremony. I want you to focus on the word that they use here, tranquil, this kind of peaceful cows. They were not doing anything wrong. Remember, these are immortal cows, so they can never die. They literally just do nothing but sit there and graze and eat all day. So they've done nothing wrong, and these men are surrounding them to kill them. They plucked the leaves that shone on a tall oak, having no barley meal to strew the victims, performed the prayers and ritual, knifed the kine, and flayed each carcass, cutting thigh bones free to wrap in double folds of fat. These offerings with strips of meat were laid upon the fire. So, what they do? They kill the cows. They do what they were told not to do. They kill the cows, start using the meat, cooking the meat to make sacrifice to the gods, and then so they can eat it themselves. Then, as they had no wine, they made libation with clear spring water, broiling the entrails first, and when the bones were burnt and tripes shared, they spitted the carved meat. So, they are cooking the cattle. They are getting ready to have this feast. Now, in perfect timing, the next line happens. Just then my slumber left me in a rush. My eyes opened, and I went down the seaward path. So the second the men cut the sheep, kill the cows, Odysseus wakes up. That is something kind of fishy to keep in your mind. Remember, he's telling this story. Maybe he's covering up something. Maybe he is telling the truth. We truly don't know. But he says, just then my slumber left me in a rush, and my eyes opened, and I went down the seaward path. No sooner had I caught sight of our black hole than savory odors of burnt fat eddied around me. Grief took hold of me, and I cried aloud, O Father Zeus and gods in bliss forever! You made me sleep away this day of mischief. O cruel drowsing in the evil hour! Here they sat, and a great work they contrived. So, the second Odysseus realizes what happened, who does he blame? The gods. He is not taking it upon himself for the fact that he left his men alone. And that he didn't tell his men what would happen if they actually touched the cows. He says, oh, gods, you made me fall asleep, as if someone could ever make you fall asleep. So he's blaming the gods for some of this natural process that happened to him. He's probably exhausted. And then he also says, he turns around really quickly and blames his men as well, this great work that they contrived themselves. Lampetia in her long gown, meanwhile, had borne swift word to the overlord of noon. Lampetia is going to be one of his daughters, sorry. They killed your kind. So everyone's watching. The gods are watching. They see that Odysseus' men did that. And then Helios finds out. And the Lord Helios burst into angry speech amid the mortals. O Father Zeus and gods in bliss forever, punish Odysseus' men. So overweening now they have killed my peaceful kine, my joy at morning when I climbed the sky of stars, and evening when I bore westward from heaven. So basically, these cows are basically his pets. He loves them, so he's really upset that they have been killed. Restitution meaning that the men pay him back in some way. Restitution or penalty they shall pay, and pay in full, or I go down forever to light the dead men in the underworld. So, what he is saying, he's saying they have to pay me back in full, find a way to pay me back, or they are going to die, and then I will haunt them all the way down to the underworld. I will never let them live in peace or rest in peace. They will suffer forever. Now, reading the explanation at the bottom. When Odysseus and his men set sail again, the crew are punished with the death of thunderbolt from Zeus as he destroys their ship, and all the men except Odysseus drown. Exhausted and nearly drowned, he makes his way to Calypso's island, where we met him originally in Book 5. Odysseus has brought us up to date. He can now rest and enjoy the comforts of Alcinous' court, but not for long. Ahead lies the most difficult task, reclaiming his own kingdom. So, at the end of this, they get back on their ship to make it off of Helios' island, off of Thrinacia. Zeus, because he's listening to what Helios said, strikes him with a thunderbolt, probably brought him some joy to do that. Every single man except Odysseus drowns. So now our prophecy has been fulfilled. What Tiresias and Circe warned him against, his men did, and all of them have died. Also, Polyphemus's prayer, his kind of curse that he puts on Odysseus whenever he prays to Poseidon after they escape from the land of the Cyclops, says that all of his men will die. That has come true. Odysseus is the only one left alive, and then he is going to land ashore on Calypso's island, which is where we found him. So now we are up to date. So anything that happens after this point is going to be in present day, what Odysseus is going to do next. Okay? If you have any questions, please let me know on Google Classroom, on Remind. I will answer those as soon as possible. Today you have a worksheet that kind of talks about or discusses the blame in Cattle of the Sun God. Who is to blame? Is it Zeus for making them land on this island? Is it Odysseus for leaving the men alone? Is it his men for being arrogant and not listening to his instructions? You guys are going to express your opinions, support those opinions with textual evidence. Okay, thanks, guys.